and it's my very great honor this evening to introduce Dr. Mark Swanson. Mark Swanson is the Harold S. Borgelaar Professor of Christian Muslim Studies and Interfaith Relations at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago. Previously, he spent 8 years teaching at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and 14 years at the Evangelical Theological Seminary in Cairo, Egypt. He's a student of Arabic Christian literature, the history of the Christian-Muslim encounter, and the medieval Coptic Orthodox Church. Mark Swanson is co-editor of the book, The Encounter of Eastern Christianity with Early Islam. He's the author of The Coptic Papacy in Islamic Egypt, 641 to 1517, and he is the Christian Arabic section editor of the 5-volume reference work, Christian-Muslim Relations, a Bibliographical History. Underlying all Mark Swanson's work is the hope that hospitality of spirit and a readiness to learn will mark people's encounters with faith from traditions and from periods not their own. This is necessary for intellectual and pastoral leadership in a religiously diverse and fascinating world. We look forward to hearing this multi-talented scholar and man of faith address us on us and them and towards the greater we. Let us give him a very warm welcome.
Professor Rich, and to the Gulen Institute and to all of you here for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm frankly surprised to find myself standing here before you this evening, surprised and humbled. It's a great honor, but it's also a great responsibility to give a keynote speech for this important conference. A conference that has gathered scholars from around the world and across the disciplines. I think my own limitations will very quickly become apparent to you. I aspire to be a theologian and something of a historian of Christian-Muslim relations, and I shall speak now this evening from those perspectives. I think what I mean is, if you don't like what you hear tonight, come back tomorrow, you're going to hear some other perspectives. But I certainly hope that there will be something here that will intersect with your own areas of interest and expertise. Exactly 10 years ago last Monday, the television station PBS broadcast a conversation between host Bill Moyers and Professor Diana Eck of the Harvard Divinity School, and also director of the Pluralism Project at Harvard University. At the time, we were all still reeling from the September 11th attacks, and individually wrestling with what Moyers called, I quote, inner landscapes ravaged by the fact of some 6,000 deaths in one great gulp, end of quote. People had been reacting in a variety of ways. Some reactions were hate-filled and violent. There were mosques that were vandalized. And on September 15th, a turban-wearing gas station owner in Mesa, Arizona, was shot dead. It turned out he was a Sikh. But other reactions showed people at their best. In communities all across the nation, there were efforts by Christians, Jews, and many others to stand in solidarity with their Muslim neighbors, whom they knew to be in no way responsible for these 9/11 attacks. On Friday, September 14th, 2001, many Muslims attending Friday prayers found themselves in the company of neighbors from other faiths who had come to express their solidarity and to ensure their safety. In many a mosque that day, the khutbah referred to that great text from Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah 5, verse 32. that whoever murders a human being, it is as if that one has killed the entirety of humanity, but whoever saves a human being, it is as if that one has saved the life of all humankind. It's against that background that Bill Moyers and Diana Eck had their conversation. In it, Professor Eck used pronouns in quite a striking way. First of all, she quoted the first phrase from the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. We, the people. She pointed out that we have, I quote, a new religious landscape in the sense that all over this country there are mosques, in places like Toledo and Cleveland and Mesa, Arizona, and Hindu temples rising in the suburbs. We, the people of the United States of America, has become much more complex. So. A little bit later, she added, specifically with regard to Islam, I quote again, there has been this dawning awareness that Islam is not in some other part of the world, but is one of our religions. One of our religions. At the time, I was head of the Islamic Studies program at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and my students and I, well, we had many long conversations that week. We had a long conversation about Professor Eck's remarks. We concurred that there had been a dawning awareness in the United States of America that religious plurality was a reality, and we were pleased that so many Christians in the wake of 9/11 were taking that reality seriously, not by resisting or protesting against that reality, but by seeking ways to learn more about their neighbors of other faiths, and even more importantly, to get to know them better as people, as human beings. And my students and I were moved by Professor Eck's use of the pronouns, her insistence on the Constitution's we, the people, recognizing the continuing challenge of realizing that we, rather than to allow ourselves to be divided into us and them. And especially our little group of U.S. American Christian theological students was instructed by her comment that Islam is one of our religions. Not just one of the world's religions, not even one of the religions that is represented in the United States of America, but one of our religions. She moved beyond dichotomies of us and them to a sense of fellowship and ownership, to a bigger us or a greater we. As I mentioned before, in my own research and writing, I aspire to be a historian of Christian-Muslim relations, and I have learned that this greater we is something that goes against the usual human grain. The history of Christian-Muslim relations is just so frequently a history of us versus them, of strictly bounded communities, each looking at the other with disdain, and each often quite happy to consign the other to hell. I regularly come across examples like this in my research. I'll share a couple of these with you. They're taken almost at random from corners of the tradition that I've recently encountered. Just last month, I wrote an encyclopedia article on a medieval Middle Eastern Christian scholar with the impressive name Al-Muwafaq Fadlallah ibn Abil Fakhr ibn Suqai, a Christian who had had a very successful career as a financial administrator under the Muslim Mamluk rulers of Egypt. So successful, in fact, that he was able to retire to a beautiful country estate outside of Damascus and write works of history and historical biography right up to the time of his death in the year 1325 at the age of nearly 100.